It's tough times for the oyster population in the Solent. The sea dweller is an essential part of the marine ecosystem, but the change of water quality and temperature, as well as invasive predators and overfishing, have made it a rare species in our waters. That's why over the past years scientists from the University of Portsmouth have been working on a pilot project to see if they can repopulate the Solent with 10 million of the threatened marine creatures.
They'll probably be put in over a series of 2 to 5 years to get the population back up to the stage that it is what's called self-recruiting. So it's a dense enough population in high enough numbers that it can reproduce naturally on the seabed and self-populate itself. We will be using hatchery oysters that are grown up to the right size, around 50 or 60 millimetres, and then either just relayed on the seabed in protected areas, or they're actually housed in artificial reef constructs, which again are protected from fishing. The other side of it is this broodstock cage pilot that we started last November. Normally oysters are on the seabed, but at the moment the oysters are in competition with the American slipper limpet. And so because as the oyster population declined, the slipper limpet population has increased massively. The Repopulate produce this pseudofeces, which is this soft, fine sediment, and it actually changes the complexion of the seabed, making it less suitable for oysters. So as well as physically taking up their habitat, they also change the nature of the ecosystem on the seabed. And so eventually when we put more oysters on the seabed, this will slowly shift. But in terms of trying to get an adult population that will survive and grow and reproduce, we thought, well, if we take them off the seabed and suspend them in cages, not only are they not in competition with the Repopulate, they're also not exposed to the same predators that they would be exposed to on the seabed.
Through 12 oyster cages in 2 different places, scientists are able to monitor growth, reproduction and mortality of the shellfish. And so far the project has been a great success. However, there have also been challenges with the death of many oysters with what could have been contamination in the water.
The great news was that actually in Portsmouth Harbour in the Camber Dock, which is not the cleanest of environments, you've got the Isle of Wight ferry that goes in and out several times a day, the mortality was really, really low. So over the whole of the year we had around 9% mortality, even in the high density cages. So it was a real success story, much more than we expected. And a similar case was true in Langston Harbour. My money was in the fact that the Langston Harbour cages, they're in sort of a high energy environment, lots more food being delivered, greater oxygenation of the water. They were doing great until probably late June, and we had a mass mortality event of the oysters. 50% of the adult oysters died. I suspect it's an environmental parameter condition that was that drove the mortality. We've got these sondes. They can monitor chlorophyll and blue-green algae concentrations. We saw on our sondes that were enormous peaks of chlorophyll in the water, which means that there's a big algal blooms happening in Langston Harbour that didn't happen in Portsmouth Harbour, which may have been, we don't know yet, need to do some more research on this, the driver behind the mortality events we saw in Langston Harbour.
Despite this incident, if the native oyster came back to the Solent, there would be many advantages.
Their filtration rates are phenomenal. So they'll filter over 16 pints in an hour. So let's say it's going some. And the important point about this is that in a busy working harbour like Langston and Portsmouth, with a high population surrounding it, there's a lot of pressure in terms of stormwater discharge, and then there's a lot of nutrients that go into in the harbours from both sewage and runoff from agricultural land. And these are higher nutrients and phosphates, which basically is sort of a green light for the growth of algae, phytoplankton. And if you have too much phytoplankton growing in the water column, it blocks out the light. And also once the algal bloom has passed, or the algae fall to the bottom of the seabed, and they're degraded and they use up the oxygen, so you can get a huge dead zones, and it decreases the water quality massively. And so having a healthy population of oysters in the Solent will mean that we have far better water quality. Aside from that, on a native oyster shell, you can often get 15 other species just living on that shell. It's not just the fact that we would like the native oyster back for water quality, but it's also that they bring with it a habitat for lots of other native biodiversity.
Nicole Ris for That's Solent.